times soft and gentle, and at times crashing hard, but always carrying us somewhere. Welcome to Reminiscence in Curds, where we ride the tide of sound and story, and I am your host, Dainty. This episode's song captures the feeling of drifting into imagination. Tatiana Ali's Daydreaming is about love, and it's also about the way our minds wander, the way we escape into possibility. Position the song as a symbol of creative wandering, where daydreams can be about life, career, nostalgia, or self-discovery even. I know it kind of reminds me of anime story in one of the past episodes, but this is a bit different. Like Ali sings, sometimes we get caught up in thoughts that pull us away from the present. So on this episode, I will share stories that explore those kinds of daydreams we carry with us. Because for Dolakbo, every weekday morning, the bus arrived late, and over time, she stopped finding it annoying. The delay became a small, dependable pocket of time that belonged only to her. She always liked to sit by the window so she could see the city pass by in fragments, store owners lifting metal gates, commuters crossing streets with cups, bags in hand, sunlight reflecting off pavements still damp from overnight rain. After a few minutes into the ride on the bus, Dolakwa's attention would drift gently, the way it used to when she was younger, and her mind wandered. Her body stayed on the bus, but her thoughts slipped into a quieter place. She worked as an administrative assistant in an office tower made almost entirely of glass. Her days were orderly and predictable, filled with calendar invites, follow-up emails with meetings that often ended without resolution. She was good at her job, she says, efficient, reliable, the person people trusted with details, but she rarely felt fully present in her own life. Most days passed in a blur of tasks completed for other people. Some of us can't relate, I bet. On the bus, though, she remembered who she used to be. As a child, she spent hours on the floor with loose sheets of paper, writing stories she never finished because finishing them felt too final. She believed then that ideas mattered, that imagination was something valuable, not something to be trimmed back once adulthood arrived. In her daydreams, though, Dolakwa didn't imagine quitting her job or starting over completely. Instead, she pictured a different rhythm to her days. She imagined work that felt intentional, mornings that did not begin with dread, evenings that ended without the sense that something had been taken from her. These were quiet fantasies built around ease and clarity rather than escape. Remember, for anime, it was an escape, but Dolakwa clarifies that these were fantasies built around ease and clarity. Eventually, the bus would slow, the doors would open, and the daydream would dissolve as easily as it came. Dolakwa would step out and walk into the office and settle back into a role. The daydream stayed with her, though, tucked somewhere beneath the surface. She says one afternoon, during a meeting that could have easily been an email, she noticed herself smiling, not because anything amusing had been said, but because a realization arrived with surprising clarity. She wasn't unhappy with her life. She was disconnected from it. The power of her that once wandered freely through ideas and possibilities had been set aside in the name of practicality. That night, instead of scrolling on her phone until sleep took over, Dolakwa opened her laptop instead. She began to write a few sentences about a woman on a bus, about routines, about the quiet places people go when no one is watching. The writing felt familiar, like returning into a room she once knew well. It was imperfect at the time and she didn't share it with anyone, but for the first time in a long while she felt grounded, present, as though she had reconnected with something she had not realized she'd lost. She didn't make any changes overnight. She says she still rides the bus. She still lets her mind wander between stops. The difference is that now she pays attention to where her thoughts go. For Dolakwa, the song brings back a state of mind, that quiet space where routine softens, where imagination gets a say again, where you remember that practicality doesn't have to mean disconnection. And in a lot of ways, that's where my own story begins too, because I've been daydreaming long before I understood why. I still do it now. I've always been a daydreamer. Yeah, the kind who build whole futures in their head while life keeps moving in real time. When I was younger, my daydreams were about growing up. I imagined having a good career, one that made sense to adults and sounded impressive when said out loud. I imagined traveling the world, collecting stamps in my passport, learning new places and new versions of myself along the way. Most of all, I imagined freedom, real freedom. The kind that comes with independence, choice, and finally being in charge of your own life. And I think a lot of people will agree with me on this, that back then adulthood looks exciting and clean. Bills felt abstract. Responsibility felt like proof that you'd made it. No one mentioned how tiring it could be to constantly manage a life, to always be planning, paying, answering, remembering. No one warned me about the mental load that comes with being responsible for everything you have and everything you still want. And I believe most adults can relate. And now, here I am. I have the career I once daydreamed about. I've done many of the things my younger self hoped for. I've traveled. I've built stability. From the outside, it looks like the dream worked exactly as planned. But adulthood is exhausting in ways you don't anticipate. Not just physically, mentally too. The kind of tire that follows you even after rest. The tire that comes from always needing to be on, always juggling responsibilities, always moving from one obligation to the next. So I started daydreaming again, but differently. These daydreams were about simplicity, about waking up without rushing, about creating without pressure, feeling present in my own life instead of constantly catching up to it. Somewhere along the way, those daydreams shifted shape again. I started imagining a space of my own, a sanctuary, if you may call it, a room that felt warm and lived in, vintage microphones that carried stories before they carried sound. Does that sound familiar? So lighting that made mornings feel gentle instead of demanding, shelves filled with little things that sparked ideas, books, notes, props that reminded me why I started telling stories in the first place. In this version of my daydream, mornings are for recording when my voice is calm and my mind is clear. Afternoons are for editing, shaping stories, letting them breathe. And evenings, those probably are for play. For experimenting with cameras, angles, visuals, finding new ways to bring the podcast to life without turning it into another obligation, if you understand what I mean. It's kind of like a creative freedom. And maybe that's what my daydreams have been leading me toward all along, not a bigger life, but a true one. One where ambition and rest can coexist, where work doesn't drain the joy of creating, where growing up doesn't mean losing curiosity. I still have responsibilities, don't get me wrong. I still pay bills, I still get tired. But now when I daydream, it doesn't feel like escape, it feels like direction. And maybe that's the real gift of daydreaming, not that it takes us away from our lives like some people say, but that it gently points us back to part of ourselves we don't want to lose. And I'm here to tell you that if adulthood has made you feel tired in ways you can't explain, maybe your daydreams are trying to speak for you. Not asking you to leave everything behind, just asking you to slow down, to soften the edges, to remember who you were before everything became about being responsible. You're not behind, you're not broken, you're just human, still dreaming, still becoming, and that's not something to grow out of. Perhaps that's why Daydreaming by Tatiana fits this episode so well. I know the song is about love. Overall, it captures that in-between space where your body is present, but your mind is somewhere else, replaying possibilities, revisiting old versions of yourself, or imagining a life that feels a little lighter. So, when you listen to the song, don't rush it. Perhaps let it play while you're doing something ordinary and see where your mind goes. Pay attention to what shows up. Because at times, the things you keep daydreaming about are already trying to find their way into your life. That's it for this episode. Thank you for listening. Truly, thank you for spending this time with me. And if you have your own daydream story, it doesn't have to be a daydream story, or a song that takes you somewhere else, reach out and tell me about it. And if this episode connected with you, don't forget to follow and share it with someone who might need it today. And until next time, remember, you are allowed to imagine more.
Thanks for rewinding with us. If a song unlocked something in you, follow the show, pass it along. And if you've got a moment worth remembering, share it at remingchords@gmail.com. The next memory we play just might be yours.